comes Milwaukee, Forbes, another three. Oh, no! This is the Random Scrub Heap Podcast.
Welcome all to another edition of the Random Scrub Heap Podcast. As you can see, I'm here flying solo tonight. LJ's busy. George is back traveling somewhere. Just kind of wanted to talk a little bit and address what's been going on with the Miami Heat and the Jimmy Butler saga and kind of how we got here and how we get out of here. The Heat just won a double overtime game against the Magic, 125-119. Obviously, a good win for the team, kind of dealing with, the cloud of dysfunction that's happening. But I don't really want to talk about the team. I don't think any win or any loss matters very much this season. I think this season is about resetting and figuring out where the Heat want to go moving forward. But let's kind of, talk about how we got to this place and why they're here and why they can't seem to get out of their own way, which has just kind of become the Heat way recently, the way this front office operates. If we go back to probably end of June, July, Jimmy wanted an extra year on his contract. The Heat obviously traded for him in 2019, gave him a 4-year deal, extended him, and now he's got this year left on his contract, making $48 million. Next year, player option, making $52 million, and he wanted an additional year at the max. And I think smartly, the Heat looked at his age, his small decline. I don't think they really were expecting him to be the guy that led them to the bubble finals in 2020 or the guy that led them to the finals against the Nuggets. And they didn't want to pay him for an additional year. And they told him, Jimmy, show up, show us you can play in the regular season, and we can get back to it and reconvene at the end of the season and see if the max is worth it. And I think it's just another example of the Heat being extremely naive, having a ton of hubris and just kind of thinking that it's going to work out for them and not really thinking of the consequences of telling a guy no who's never been that good at hearing no. Jimmy was drafted by the Bulls, has had an awesome career, probably one of the better careers ever for a guy drafted at the end of the first round, especially pick 30, so he would have been the last pick. But he's had issues every stop, everywhere he's been. He wanted out of Chicago. He was feuding with teammates there. They sent him to Minnesota. He didn't want to be there. Eventually, Minnesota and Miami were talking trade, but it sounded like they wanted Bam and couldn't work that out. So Minnesota moved him to Philadelphia. And even though he was great there and led them, as far as they've been in the playoffs recently, it didn't work out there either because he wanted a 5-year max from the Sixers, and they obviously didn't agree with that. I think the coach at the time was Bruce Brown. It seemed like they kind of were favoring Ben Simmons over Jimmy. And Jimmy famously said Tobias Harris over me because that's who they ended up signing. And, Jimmy kind of, again, forces his way to another team and got to Miami. And for many years, it was a match made in heaven. And, his idiosyncrasies and the things that kind of make him tick work for a Heat organization that is all about the Heat culture and working hard and showing up and battling. But I mean, all good things come to an end, and for the Heat to sit here and think that Jimmy was going to be a good soldier and just go out there every night and give it his all when he asked for more money and the Heat said no is just kind of a variant of this problem this Heat team has had over the past few years. They're unable to adapt to situations that change, whether it's around the league or around their team or, with anything. As we've discussed many times on this pod in the past, as people I think are starting to realize, like the Heat are really good at one thing. They're really, really good at finding undrafted talent around the league. Guys that are kind of underutilized or, other scouts didn't think they'd make a big NBA impact, but the Heat have been really good at finding those guys. The problem is they don't know what to do when it comes to the time to make a decision on these guys. I don't care what anyone says. We all could have different opinions, but there was no point in time where Duncan Robinson was worth $90 million. There was no point in time where he should have been the highest paid undrafted free agent of all time. Ever, ever, ever. He had an unbelievable season the year after he came into the league. The Heat should have been willing to move him. They weren't. The Heat find a Gabe Vincent and a Max Strus who were instrumental in helping them get to the finals against the Nuggets and ultimately falling in 5 games. But, I don't think that series was super close, and Gabe Vincent leaves for nothing. He's still, kind of playing backup minutes for the Lakers. They luckily got a second-round pick out of Max Strus because, the Cavs wanted to pay him $16 million, so the Heat were just kind of lucky that happened, and they got a second-round pick out of that deal. But, all of these guys, while they've been good for the Heat, have been replaceable. They've found replacements for these rotation guys that they've managed to pluck up the streets, but they've never moved these guys at the height of their value when they could recoup assets, which are necessary in today's NBA, to really be ready to make the next move. And as you look around the league and you look at the teams that really have a chance to win, that aren't always middling around the play-in, they've been willing to sacrifice seasons to make that happen. We talk about this a lot. The players are not actively tanking. No one's going out there and, missing shots or anything like that, except for Jonte Porter, who's obviously banned from the NBA. But no one's going out there trying to lose. But there are ways, to sneakily not put the best team out there so that, if you miss the postseason and you ended up getting a lottery pick one year, wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. And the Heat can't do that. They just cannot accept that maybe it wouldn't be so bad to lose for a year or two to come back in a great spot. Like, do you think the San Antonio Spurs like losing? They're a team that's won 5 championships, right? They're one of the greatest NBA franchises ever. But do you think it might have been worth it for them to lose for 1 year to get Victor Wembanyama? Do you think the Mavericks are mad that they lost 1 year to get the 5th pick that they ended up trading to get Luka Doncic? I don't really understand this. I know the Heat have been burned before, kind of the one time they really tanked. And obviously a lot of that had to do with Wade's shoulder injury. And it ended up being Michael Beasley, who like as long as I live, I'll never understand why he just. I mean, I get why he didn't work out, but I'm just saying the talent and the season he had at Kansas State. I'm always confused about just how that didn't work out. But sometimes you got to take 2 steps backwards to go 3 steps forward. If this Heat team ends up keeping Jimmy on the roster and trying to work him back in, or just sitting him for the rest of the year, and it's just these guys that have been playing, while there's some decent young guys, while Hero's having a nice year, while obviously Ware is showing a ton of potential. This is still a playing team. This is a team that's, even if they were to make the postseason, they're losing in 5 games to, the Celtics or the Cavs or a team that, is at the top of the East. They're not competing. And at that point, besides getting the young guys a couple playoff games, which we said last year too, we said, oh, I'd rather get Jaime a playoff game. I'd rather let Jovic have some playoff experience, which, has done what for them this year. I mean, not sure Jaime's having the best sophomore season. Jovic has been a little bit better lately, but I'm not really sure what they're gaining. What would be really good for a team like the Heat? More young, talented guys like Khalil Ware, freshmen or sophomores, 18 or 19-year-old kids who can come in, that have talent, that can put the ball into the basket and really give this team a spark and let them, kind of figure out where the next steps are for this team. Because sitting here, suspending Jimmy for 7 games, having him come back, sleepwalk through 3 games, then suspending him for 2 because he, missed a team flight or whatever he was doing, and then trying to bring him back a 3rd time today. And I guess he got annoyed that they asked him to come off the bench and that they were going to start Haywood Highsmith over him, and obviously walking away from shoot around and then being suspended indefinitely, which could be a lot of games or could be 5 because there's only 5 Heat games left. Sorry, 4 now until the trade deadline on February 6th. So I think it's in everyone's best interest to move on. If Phoenix is really what he wants and Phoenix is willing to extend him, which who knows if they'd still want to do that after all the antics he's pulled. But if I'm the Heat, I'm making calls for James Jones, and I'm finding out which teams want Beal. If he'd have a good relationship with Beal's agent, Mark Bartelstein. And I am getting pieces that give me some flexibility and maybe a pick or 2, and just moving on from this Jimmy thing. This is something that should have happened 7 months ago. This is something that was boiling, that they knew about. Why the Heat thought Jimmy Butler, who has wore out his welcome at every team, at every stop, would roll over and play nice for the Heat. I don't really understand the thinking there. And, I don't care if they got assurances from his agent. I don't care if they got assurances from him. You have to see the storm coming and you have to prep for it. And their inability to adapt and make those type of decisions has kind of doomed them since LeBron left in 2014. And they didn't really see that coming either. And in retrospect, I don't know why. Like, LeBron was always plotting and planning to go back to Cleveland. And, while you could argue the Heat have had a successful 5-year run with Jimmy and they made 2 finals, and they're one of only 2 teams to do that, which the other team being the Celtics. I just, look at the other side of the coin, which is Boston, and they seem to have figured it out. They realized that they liked Tatum and Brown together, but they needed a lot of help to win. They were guys that, while good and young, had flaws that weren't going to bring them a championship on their own. And so they went out and made trades. They brought in Drew Holiday. They brought in Kristaps Porzingis. They drafted role players that make sense. And I promise you that even if they like these role players, if there's a deal that makes sense, they will move those guys in a second. I mean, he's having a very good year for them, but if the team came calling for Pritchard and the deal made sense, like, they're going to move him. They're not going to think twice about it, because having young assets is so that you can improve the team when the call comes to do that. And I'm just a bit worried that this Heat team is just so set in their ways that they're never going to admit their flaws, learn from their mistakes, and move on from them. Like this Jimmy thing, there's an argument to be made that Jimmy should have been traded the moment the Dame trade fell through. They should have pivoted and said, we went after the guy you wanted. It didn't work out. We couldn't make a deal with Joe Cronin. So, hey, man, where do you want to go? Let's work this out. Because Jimmy, after the finals, probably nets you something nice. He had a good postseason. Even with the injury against the Knicks, he was, it's kind of what he did in those, in that run. He had a really nice first round series against the Bucks. They didn't need him as much against the Knicks, and he was amazing early on in the Celtics before. I feel like the injury kind of caught up with him. So we're just in the spot again where the Heat are consistently behind the 8 ball. And I'm arguing with people who have to bring up past results to justify this front office. And that wouldn't work in any walk of life. If you were trying to get a raise, you can bring up last year's results to justify why you need more money now, but can't say 5 years ago, I was the highest salesman at the company. If you're in the middle of the pack now, but you're still making a ton of money, company's going to find a way to find people they can get in who are hungrier than you, who want to do more than you, and are willing to do whatever's necessary to make them successful. You don't rest on your laurels because you went to a finals, two seasons ago. No one cares anymore. You're a footnote in history. You were second place, which I think after the season you can enjoy and you can accomplish, and you can revel in your accomplishments and say, hey, we're the second, we're the second 8th seed all time to make it to the finals. I think that's cool, but neither 8th seed is happy that they finished second, and this is just kind of where they continue to find themselves. They continue to just kind of find themselves in quicksand, and the more and more they seem to get stubborn and fight against the ever-changing landscape of the NBA and the new CBA, they're just sinking more and more. I don't think they accomplish anything this season if again they make it to the play-in, they win in and get into the playoffs, and they lose in the first round. I'm not sure what you're doing except putting a couple more dollars in Mickey Harrison's pockets for the 2 home playoff games they're going to host, and that's really it. I'm not seeing, as a team, and a team that really has a team that's known for for greatness, right? The Heat have been around for 36 years. They've won 3 championships. They're a very successful organization. Pat Riley is one of the greatest winners ever. He's a ton of championships from his. I think he has one as a player, from his coaching days, from his, at one time Riley was a really, really elite GM, and I just think he's an old man now, and it's okay to move on from this kind of stuff. It's okay to realize that your best days are behind you, and it's okay to pivot. Took Spo like half a season to play Ware, who's I think well on his way to winning Rookie of the Year and winning it pretty easily. Obviously, would have been an argument that Jared McCain probably had started out, in a hot spot where maybe he would have done it. But, if Ware's averaging 19 and 9 a game, or, if it's not going to be 19 and 9, but if he's averaging, 12 and 7 for the season, he's probably going to win Rookie of the Year. And I think that he really needs to rip off the Band-Aid with this Jimmy situation. I don't think continuing to bring him back, hoping he's going to be well behaved now, is the answer. And I like Jimmy. I like what he did for the Heat. I understand why he's upset now. And I can also admit he's acting like a prick. And he's really not, I don't think, helping his trade value or helping any of that. But at the same time, the Heat continually expecting things that are very rare, or keep doing the same things and expecting a different result. I think Einstein said that's the definition of insanity. And that's kind of where they are as a front office. They continue to bring in undrafted guys and let them walk for nothing. Or on the opposite end, they pay them the most money an undrafted free agent has ever seen. Or they try to pay Caleb Martin twice as much as he got on the market to go to the Sixers. So, that's part one. Then they have decent guys that would make sense playing, and we're wasting a lot of time playing guys that just haven't worked out, like Terry Rozier. Obviously, that trade in hindsight is terrible. And it's not only terrible because of what they gave up to get him, it's terrible because he's taking away minutes from guys that he shouldn't be taking away minutes from at where he is on this team and with what they're trying to do. And then there's the last part of it, which is, regardless of what you think of Jimmy as a player at his age and where he is, like, his behavior is holding the team back. And his participation isn't needed this season because this is not a contender. This is not a championship team. So Jimmy Butler or not, he doesn't need to be there. And to bring him back again, like I said, for the third time today, to try and, make nice, it's just dumb. And they're just acting like a stupid team. And you don't want to admit it. You don't want to look at a team that you've always revered and respected and was arguably your favorite team in the market and the one you could always depend on to put a good product on the court every night. But, this is unfortunately the team that's going to just run out a squad for 6 years in a row that has never been enough. And the crazy part is everyone knows it. The other teams know it. Pretty confident the players know it. The fans absolutely know it. And I think deep down the front office knows it. I don't think they're sitting there, I know they're saying certain things, but I really don't think they're saying they're being, yeah, this team with Jimmy's a real contender. Oh, yeah, at the same time, this team without Jimmy is still a contender. Like, yes, it's good for the players to have the attitude that they can beat anyone, but we know that's not the case. And I think deep down the front office knows the same thing. So I think I'm ready to move on from this chapter of the Heat. It was successful in that I don't know where people saw us going when we got Jimmy. I'm not sure we thought we'd make it to 2 finals, and obviously you want to win one when you're there, and I understand why both didn't go the Heat's way, but at the same time, I don't think this front office made any moves that really helped them put them in a spot to actually win, right? The best addition they've made in the entire time Jimmy's been here is what, a 37-year-old PJ Tucker who was here for 1 season, was great. Obviously, kind of got hurt and was not in great shape at the end of the Celtics loss in that Eastern Conference Finals. But that's really the best move this team has made, transaction-wise, because obviously we could argue the Ware draft pick looks pretty good right now, but transaction-wise, they traded for Lowry. They re-signed Duncan. They brought in a slew of undrafted free agents. And now last year they made the Rozier trade, which obviously isn't good. They just haven't done any real moves to figure out how to better this team. And now, because they're paying the salary tax this season, I apologize, the luxury tax this season, they are not going to be able to pay the tax for the next few years. They're going to want to avoid the luxury tax for the next 2 seasons. So this is the season to figure it out. This is the season to lose. This is the season to get a lottery pick. This is the season to trade Jimmy. This is the season to move on. This is the season to right the ship and figure out what they want to do moving forward. This is the season to rearrange the front office and make this thing finally make sense. They don't need to continue to pretend like this is working. They don't need to sit here and lie to our faces. They don't need to tell us that we have enough, because we all know that's not the case. And I think we all are ready to rip the Band-Aid off and move on. I don't think anyone's sitting here, don't think too many fans are that excited or were that excited about extending Jimmy Butler for a year. We've paid him a lot. They're on the hook for $100 million, including this season. I just don't think that's where anyone wants to be. So it's time for this front office to actually make the moves and make the tough decisions that the fans think that they're making, or the fans who argue that they're a great front office. It's time for that to happen. It's time for the front office to say, this hasn't exactly gone our way. That's okay. Here's our plan moving forward. And this is how we want to build back the greatness that was the Miami Heat. And we've lost our way, and we're going to tweak some things, and we're going to get back to that. And that starts with moving Jimmy and figuring out salary moving forward, and getting, my opinion, getting close to the tax line so that it's more manageable both this season, even if they end up paying the tax, and moving forward. And that's really where we need to be. There's nothing really else to discuss. The game-to-game stuff, I mean, you could obviously listen to other pods if you want the breakdown of a game like tonight, and obviously a good win at home against Orlando, a team that's struggling, but so are the Heat. And you can go to other podcasts for that kind of stuff. But we're going to talk about, how we get back to glory and how we really figure out what makes sense going forward. And step one is trading Jimmy, which is a move well past its expiration date. And then from there, it's figuring out who makes sense going forward. who's available next season. Can we acquire some draft picks to, send out some expiring contracts like a Duncan or a Rozier next season and get some of this stuff done? Because I think all of us are tired of mediocrity. I think all of us are tired of this cycle of being in the middle. And I think we're ready for something new, even if it's a step back to eventually move forward. And I think it's okay to hold this front office accountable. I think it's okay to talk about where they went wrong. I think it's okay to admit where and how they disappointed us. And I think it's okay for them to learn from their mistakes and figure this out. And I don't think it's all right to keep doing the same thing and just expect this Heat team to somehow compete, because they're not close to the upper echelon of the NBA. They're not close to the Celtics. They're not close to the Thunder. They're not close to the Nuggets. And I want to be back there. And I think they want to be back there. So it's time to go back. And it's time to be a relevant, contending franchise again. And I think that's all I got for you tonight. So just wanted to kind of give a little spiel. Hope I didn't go on for too long or bore anybody. But as always, guys, hope everyone has a good night. We'll figure out when we'll see you again soon. And just be good people.
Need a stop and a rebound. Fournier for three.
That was the Random Scrub Heat podcast.